Every crew has that one friend who makes a suggestion that sounds insane on paper but somehow everyone agrees to anyway. For Kiben's group, that friend was Kiben. And the suggestion, as always, was to gamble. He'd booked the penthouse. He'd covered the expenses. He'd even pre-tipped the hotel concierge. Kiben didn't do anything halfway, least of all Las Vegas. The trip wasn't a vacation. It was a pilgrimage. Sanskriti said, set a limit and stick to it. Daniela said, I'm only going for the food. Hudson said, I don't even really gamble. The narrator notes these statements for the record. They will age very poorly. Before the caravan could roll out, Julian pulled up. And when Julian pulled up, there was a process, a mandatory, non-negotiable process of appreciation that had to be observed. Julian did not simply drive a car. Julian and that Z32 had a relationship. The kind you don't interrupt, don't disrespect, and absolutely do not touch without asking first. Ethan touched without asking. The look Julian gave him could have stopped a slot machine mid-spin. Vegas hit them all at once the moment they stepped through the doors of the Orem Casino. It wasn't a building, it was a living thing. Loud and glittering and hungry, dressed up in gold like it wasn't trying to take every dollar you had. Giselle was at the slots within 4 minutes. By minute 6 she was screaming, the good kind. Ethan and Jameson found a blackjack table and began making it rain in a way that suggested neither of them had ever heard the word strategy. Sanskriti set a hard limit, wrote it on her phone notes app with timestamp. Daniela did the same and added a star to it. They were the sensible ones. They lasted approximately 40 minutes before the casino floor rewrote the terms of the evening. And then there was Hudson. Careful Hudson. Responsible Hudson. The man who had a color-coded budget spreadsheet for this trip. He sat down at a roulette table, he said, just to watch. He won. Then he won again. Then he won a third time, and his glasses fogged from excitement, and somewhere in the pleasure center of Hudson's brain, a switch flipped that would not be switched back easily. The narrator warns you now, the way anyone who has spent time in a casino should warn you. The house loves a man who wins small first. It is the most expensive kind of winning there is. Hours passed the way they only do in casinos, without clocks, without windows, without mercy. By midnight Hudson had chased 3 losses. By 2 a.m. he'd cleaned out his weekend cash. By 3 a.m. he was making bank transfers on his phone under a roulette table's amber light, hand shaking slightly, telling himself it was just one more spin. Giselle found him and tried to pull him up by the arm. He smiled the smile of a man who has decided something very bad is fine, said, I've almost got it back, and turned back to the table. That sentence, I've almost got it back, has launched 1,000 financial disasters. Meanwhile, and the narrator uses that word very deliberately, Julian had been escorted by a smooth casino host in a suit that cost more than most people's rent into a private room behind a door that didn't have a sign on it. The private poker room was a different world, quieter, darker, thicker with money and history. The men at that table had been playing longer than Julian had been alive. They didn't smile at him out of warmth. They smiled at him the way a chess player smiles at a new piece on the board. Julian held his own, for a while. He read hands, he bluffed clean, he won 3 pots in a row and felt the electricity of it. But the room had patience that he didn't, and eventually the chips moved in the direction they always move in a room like that. When his chips ran out, he did something that makes absolute perfect sense if you are Julian and absolutely 0 sense if you are anyone else. He put his card title on the table as a buy-in. Because of course he did. He lost by a single card. A 7 of diamonds that the dealer turned over like it was nothing, like it wasn't a key and a title deed and 3 years of weekend detailing going face up on a poker table in a room with no windows. Morning in Las Vegas is not gentle. The sun comes up indifferent to what happened to you the night before, and the city just keeps going. In Kiben's penthouse suite, however, morning arrived like a verdict. Julian came through the door about 15 minutes later. He didn't explain. He didn't have to. He walked in, found the patch of floor next to Hudson, and lowered himself down against the glass. Then he said, they took the Z. Sanskriti and Giselle found them first. The rest filtered in, Ethan, Jameson, Daniela, and the suite that had felt like a celebration the night before felt like something else entirely. Nobody cracked a joke. Even Ethan was quiet. Kiben stood in the doorway to the suite and took it all in. His friends, broken, exhausted, emptied out by the same force that had always felt like oxygen to him. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he pocketed his poker chip and said, "I'm going back down." What happened next on the casino floor, the narrator must be honest, is the kind of thing you don't fully explain, you just describe. Some runs are luck, some runs are skill. Kiben's run that morning was something that lives in the overlap between those two things, in the space that gamblers call the zone. He moved through tables like water, finding the path of least resistance, poker, then baccarat, then back to poker, each game building. He wasn't performing, he wasn't celebrating, he was working. The narrator has never used that word about Kiben in any other context. It fits perfectly here. Then, almost as an afterthought, the way geniuses and disasters both tend to operate, he sat down at the high roller slots. He didn't have a reason. He just felt like it. He pulled the lever. The machine erupted. Every light on it fired simultaneously. The sound was something between a symphony and an alarm. And the number on the display climbed, and climbed, and climbed, and stopped. $100 million. The entire casino floor went still. Kiben stood in front of that machine for exactly 3 seconds without moving. The poker chip had stopped rolling. His hand had gone still. Around him, the entire Orem casino floor held its breath like it had been asked a question it didn't know the answer to. Then a casino employee arrived. Then 2 more. Then a floor manager in a suit that cost more than most people's cars, moving fast and saying very little. They didn't kick Kiben out. They escorted him. The kind of escorting that comes with champagne in a private elevator and a smile that never fully reaches the eyes. Kiben rode that elevator back up to the penthouse suite with a glass of complimentary champagne he did not drink, the poker chip rolling across his knuckles again, thinking about nothing at all. That was the thing about him. The bigger the moment, the quieter he got inside. The narrator finds this either admirable or deeply alarming, and has not decided which. He opened the suite door and said, simply, "Come downstairs." That was all. His face told the rest, and his face was saying something none of them had ever seen on it before. Even Sanskriti, who could read Kiben like a bilingual dictionary, went quiet and just grabbed her bag. He told them at the base of the elevator, on the casino floor, in front of the machine that still had a crowd around it. He said the number out loud. There was a beat of total silence, the kind that has texture, and then Giselle screamed so loud a slot machine technician across the floor physically flinched. Giselle did, briefly, faint. She caught herself on Jameson's arm on the way down, which meant it was more of a dramatic swoon than a full collapse. But the narrator wants to be clear. Her knees actually gave. Ethan caught her other arm, laughing so hard he could barely hold her, and somehow that was the image that broke the tension wide open. Ethan, once Giselle was stabilized, located Hudson across the group and lifted him completely off the ground in a bear hug that Hudson had absolutely no time to prepare for. Hudson's wire-framed glasses went sideways. He made a sound that was probably supposed to be dignified protest but came out as pure overwhelmed joy. Then Kiben walked to the casino host station, requested the manager he'd dealt with earlier, and made a very specific ask. Julian was standing nearby, still numb, still wearing the expression of a man who had mentally accepted the loss, when Kiben came back and held out a laminated rectangle of paper. A car title. The Z32. Julian took it with both hands. He read it twice. He looked up at Kiben, and his jaw was working like he had words ready but couldn't find the door to let them out. Then he turned away from the group, just slightly, just enough, and the narrator will say only that his shoulders did something they don't usually do, and leave it at that. Kiben also settled every dollar Hudson had lost, transferred, confirmed, done before Hudson had fully processed what was happening. He booked out the entire top floor of the hotel through the weekend. And then he bought another round for every stranger within arm's reach at the nearest bar, because apparently that's what Kiben does when he's sitting on $100 million. The night that followed, the narrator will not pretend to fully reconstruct it. It was neon and laughter and the particular elation of people who came very close to something bad and ended up somewhere impossibly good instead. At some point Giselle got on top of a blackjack table. At some point Ethan convinced a pit boss to let him deal. Sanskriti danced, which she will deny if asked. 2 days later, back at Kiben's beachside mansion, the whole group was still orbiting the event like planets that hadn't quite resettled. The retractable glass walls were folded open, the ocean was doing its thing, and everything felt like the morning after a war that somehow ended well. Then Kiben's phone rang. He answered it. He listened. His face didn't change, not the way most people's faces change when they receive catastrophic news. It went very flat instead, which for Kiben is a different and much more serious thing. The casino's legal team spoke for 4 minutes. He did not say much back. When the line went dead, he stood there holding the phone. Software malfunction. Stacked multipliers that were never supposed to trigger. Catastrophic display error. The real payout from his spin, $4,200. The $100 million, not real. They needed it back. All of it. The narrator pauses here to let the viewer feel the geometry of that. $4,000, against $100 million. The sheer brutal distance between those two numbers. Then came the knock at the front door. Heavy. Official. The kind of knock that has a badge behind it. Kiben walked to the door, gripped the handle, and opened it. He saw the 2 officers and the 3 casino suits standing on his step. Then he closed the door again. Calmly. Completely. The room went absolutely silent. The group had registered the knock. They had registered the door opening. They had absolutely registered the door closing in the way that it closed. Sanskriti stood up from the sectional. She looked at Kiben. She knew that look. She started to say, "Kiben, don't." He was already moving. The narrator has watched a lot of men in a lot of stories make decisions in critical moments. Some fold under pressure. Some freeze. Kiben, and the narrator says this without judgment, or at least without very much, raises. Always. It is the only move he knows. What followed at the front entrance was chaotic and loud and overfast. The friends did not wait to analyze it. The sound of it was enough. They scattered through the mansion like a starting pistol had fired, crashing into hallways and bedroom doors. Giselle screaming a word the narrator will not reproduce here. Kiben was already through the open glass walls. He ran across the teak-pooled terrace, across the sand, his shoes filling with it, not that it mattered now, toward the private dock where the house edge sat moored and ready and gleaming white against dark water. And standing on the upper deck, as if she had been there for hours, was Celeste. She didn't say, "I heard what happened." She didn't say, "Are you okay?" She looked at him the way people look at weather, acknowledging it, calibrating for it, neither surprised nor particularly troubled by it. Kiben hit the gangway at a run, boarded, and shouted back toward the dock, "Cast off." The engines answered. The friends were left on the beach. Giselle was still yelling, full volume, at the receding white hull, something about the money and the car and about how she looked his lawyer's information up for him and he should have used it. Julian stood beside her, hands in his jacket pockets, watching the yacht go. Hudson sat down in the sand and looked at his empty wallet. Again. Somewhere in international waters, under a sky that had gone full stars, the house edge sat quiet on a glassy dark ocean. City lights were a distant smear behind them. The world and its consequences were someone else's problem, at least for now. Kiben and Celeste sat across from each other at the felt-topped card table on the upper deck. The narrator can account for approximately $11,000 in cash in Kiben's jacket pocket, and whatever chips he still had on him. He had no $100 million. He had no mansion. He had no plan that would satisfy any reasonable person's definition of the word. What he had was a card table. A bottle of whiskey. A woman who played like she had never been afraid of losing in her life. And the open ocean. Kiben picked up his hand. Looked at it. Looked across at Celeste. She was already watching him. Had been watching him, probably, since before he sat down. He rolled the poker chip one slow pass across his knuckles. And then he smiled. Not the big wild grin of the man who hit $100 million, but the smaller, truer one. The smile of a man who is exactly where he is supposed to be. Hudson eventually climbed out of debt. Slowly. Painfully. With a spreadsheet and a lot of meal prepping. He swore off gambling forever, and held that oath for 6 months before Ethan got him to a charity poker night. Julian got the Z32 back, still has it, maintains it religiously, and has not let anyone touch the hood since Las Vegas. Sanskriti filed a detailed incident report about everything she witnessed and has blocked Kiben on every platform she's aware of. She checks for new ones periodically. Giselle tells the story at every party she goes to. She has refined it over time. The timing is better, she's added a pause before the number that is genuinely effective. Somehow she comes out of every telling sounding proud. Jameson and Ethan still argue about whether Kiben is a genius or a lunatic, usually late at night over drinks when someone brings up the trip. The narrator's position. Why does it have to be one or the other? And Kiben? As of the last anyone heard, the house edge was spotted off the coast of Monaco. A poker game was reportedly ongoing on the upper deck. A woman with platinum blonde hair was seen winning. The narrator cannot confirm this and has not tried very hard to. Some stories are better when the last frame stays a little out of focus. The poker chip spun on the green felt of the upper deck. Kiben had set it going before the first hand was dealt, and it had not fallen. That is the final image the narrator keeps returning to. Not the 100 million on the display. Not the sirens. The chip, spinning, refusing to commit. There is a version of this story where Kiben is the villain. He fired a weapon. He ran. He left 7 people on a beach and sailed into international waters to play cards with a mysterious woman in a white dress. The narrator acknowledges this version exists and has some merit. There is also a version where Kiben is the most alive person in this entire story. The only one who never pretended the ground beneath him was solid, never acted surprised when the card came up wrong. He built his whole life around the fact that the house always has an edge. He just named his boat after it. Celeste won the first hand. And the third. Kiben took the second and fourth and sat back with his whiskey and studied her the way he studied every table. Like a text he was reading for the second time, catching things he missed on the first pass. She let him look. She was used to it. The poker chip finally stopped spinning somewhere around the 5th hand. It landed on its edge, leaning against a discarded card, and stayed there, tilted, balanced, not quite fallen. Kiben looked at it, looked back at Celeste, dealt the next round himself. The ocean went on in every direction, enormous and unbothered, like it had seen this before.